Commander Vex drummed his clawed fingers against the metal surface of his desk, the sound echoing through the Coalition briefing room. The personnel file glowing on his datapad showed numbers that made his reptilian features scrunch in disbelief. Outside the reinforced windows of the command station, the massive bulk of 3 Coalition dreadnoughts drifted in formation, their blue engines casting strange shadows across the room. Sergeant Kate Miller sat perfectly still in the chair across from him. Her brown hair was pulled back in regulation style, and her gray Coalition uniform bore the scars of countless missions. She looked ordinary enough, but the file in front of Vex told a different story. A story he simply couldn't believe. The briefing room door hissed open as the rest of his mixed-species squad filed in. Lieutenant Ross, a lanky human from Earth's North American sector, took his usual seat near the holographic display. His partner, Corporal Jake Thompson, settled beside him while checking his sidearm. Both humans looked relaxed, but Vex noticed they kept glancing at Kate with something that looked almost like respect. The alien members of the squad were harder to read. Trooper Hicks, whose blue skin marked him as one of the aquatic nereid species, moved with the fluid grace of his people as he found his position. The massive Corvan warrior, Staff Sergeant Brull, had to duck through the doorway. His rocky hide scraped against the frame as he squeezed his bulk into a reinforced chair designed for his species. Vex had commanded mixed units for over 20 years. He'd fought alongside humans, studied their tactics, and earned their trust during the border wars. But this file challenged everything he thought he knew about Earth's military capabilities. Miller, Vex began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd climbed from enlisted ranks to command. I've reviewed your service record 3 times. These kill counts, they're impossible. Kate's expression didn't change. She sat with her hands folded, waiting. Humans joined the Galactic Coalition 15 years ago, Vex continued, warming to his argument. Your species was barely spacefaring when we made contact. Yet according to this file, you've eliminated more enemy combatants than some of our most decorated veterans. Ross shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Jake's hand stopped moving over his weapon. Even the alien squad members seemed to sense the tension building in the room. Vex pulled up specific numbers on his datapad, the blue glow reflecting off his scaled features. It says here you've been deployed to 43 different combat zones. 43. I've been fighting for twice as long and I've seen maybe 20 serious engagements. The room had grown completely quiet. Outside, a squadron of Coalition fighters swept past the windows in tight formation, their running lights blinking against the star field. Furthermore, Vex pressed on, these casualty reports show you've personally accounted for. He paused, double-checking the numbers. Over 6,000 confirmed eliminations. That's not just impossible, Miller. That's insulting to every warrior in this room who's actually earned their victories. Brull, the massive Corvan, made a rumbling sound deep in his chest. It might have been agreement or warning. With his species it was hard to tell. Kate finally moved. Without breaking eye contact with Vex, she reached into her tactical vest with slow, deliberate movements. The gesture was so casual that it took a moment for anyone to react. Ross started to lean forward. Kate, maybe we should. It's fine, Tom, she said quietly, her voice carrying a strange weight that made Ross settle back into his chair. From an inner pocket, Kate withdrew a small data storage device. The thumb drive was standard Coalition issue, about the size of her thumb, with the dull gray finish of military hardware. She placed it carefully on the metal table between herself and Vex. The tiny device seemed to absorb all the attention in the room. Even Hicks, whose species communicated as much through color changes in their skin as through words, had gone completely still. Kate slid the drive across the table. It made a soft metallic click as it came to rest in front of Vex. Begin with folder 1, she said, her voice barely above a whisper but somehow carrying to every corner of the room. Work your way up when you think you can handle it. The silence stretched on for several heartbeats. Somewhere in the distance, the deep thrum of the station's engines provided a constant background rhythm. Vex looked down at the innocuous device, then back at Kate's face. Her expression remained neutral, but something in her eyes suggested she was completely serious about whatever was contained on that drive. Jake cleared his throat. Commander, maybe you should wait until? No, Kate said softly. He wants proof. That's proof. She stood up smoothly, her movements economical and precise. When you're ready for folder 2, let me know. But I recommend you watch them in order. Context matters. Without another word, Kate turned and walked toward the exit. Her boots made no sound on the metal floor, and she moved with the unconscious grace of someone comfortable with violence. At the doorway she paused and looked back at Vex, who was still staring at the thumb drive. "Fair warning, Commander," she added. "Some of those files are still classified at levels you might not have clearance for. But your commanding officer approved the release for this conversation." The door hissed shut behind her, leaving the rest of the squad in uncomfortable silence. Vex's quarters aboard the Coalition station were dimly lit as he slotted the thumb drive into his personal terminal. The soft blue glow of the screen cast shadows across his scaled features as he settled into his chair. 3 cups of Terran coffee sat cooling on his desk, forgotten in his growing curiosity about what Kate had shown him. The drive's contents appeared on his screen in neat folders, numbered 1 through 47. Each folder contained dozens of files with timestamps going back nearly 2 decades. Vex hesitated for a moment, then clicked on folder 1. The date stamp made him pause. 18 years ago. That was before humanity had even announced their presence to the greater galaxy. According to official records, humans were still figuring out basic space travel at that time. The first video file loaded with a soft chime. The image was grainy, clearly recorded through combat helmet footage. A young voice crackled through the speakers, barely recognizable as Kate's. "Day 3 on retrieval mission. Still no contact with command. Recording for mission log." Vex leaned forward. The Kate on screen looked impossibly young, maybe 17 or 18 years old. Her face was thinner, less weathered, but her eyes already held that steady focus he recognized from their briefing. She wore primitive body armor that looked cobbled together from various sources. The camera view shifted as she turned her head. Vex's breath caught in his throat. The landscape around her was a hellscape of twisted metal and burning craters. In the distance, massive shapes moved between the wreckage of what had once been a city. Even through the poor video quality, Vex could make out their distinctive silhouettes. Devourers. Vex's claws extended involuntarily as old memories surfaced. The Devourers had been the nightmare of the galaxy for centuries. A species that consumed entire worlds, not for resources, but seemingly for the joy of destruction itself. They'd wiped out 12 different civilizations before simply vanishing into deep space. Most Coalition species still had nightmares about them. "Holy stars," Vex whispered. "The humans fought Devourers as their first contact?" On screen, young Kate was explaining the situation to her helmet camera. "Lost contact with the evacuation ships 2 days ago. Estimate 300 civilians still trapped in the underground shelters. Enemy forces have the area surrounded." The view panned across her squad. 6 humans total, all looking impossibly young and under-equipped. They crouched behind the twisted remains of some kind of transport vehicle, surrounded by alien technology they clearly didn't understand. "We've managed to salvage some enemy weapons," Kate continued, hefting a rifle that was obviously Devourer design. "Took us 6 hours to figure out the firing mechanism, but they pack more punch than our standard gear." Vex watched in amazement as the young human demonstrated her point. She raised the alien rifle, took careful aim at a distant Devourer scout and fired. The energy bolt struck true, dropping the 8-foot-tall creature instantly. 43 confirmed eliminations so far, Kate reported calmly. "Enemy adaptation patterns suggest they're learning our tactics, but we've managed to stay mobile." The next several video files showed fragments of the battle that followed. Vex found himself gripping the arms of his chair as he watched 6 teenage humans outmaneuver hundreds of Devourers through sheer ingenuity and determination. In one clip, Kate had jury-rigged a Devourer plasma cannon to their human power source, creating a weapon that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. In another, her squad used the enemy's own communication frequencies against them, broadcasting false orders that sent entire Devourer units into ambushes. But what struck Vex most was their absolute refusal to retreat. When conventional tactics failed, they improvised. When their improvised weapons broke, they used the environment itself. When surrounded, they fought their way out. When outnumbered 100 to 1, they just fought harder. The helmet camera captured Kate during a brief lull in the fighting. She was maybe 50 meters from a crashed Devourer ship, using its hull for cover. Her face was streaked with dirt and alien blood, but her voice remained steady. "Mission update Day 5. Successfully evacuated 237 civilians through the underground tunnels. Estimate 70 still trapped in Sector 7. Enemy forces have adapted to our previous tactics, but we've identified a weakness in their formation protocols." She gestured toward the Devourer ship behind her. "We're going to use their own vessel as a weapon. If this doesn't work..." She paused, then looked directly into the camera. "Tell Earth that humanity's first contact went exactly as expected. We didn't back down." The final video in Folder 1 showed the aftermath. Kate and her surviving squad members stood amid the smoking ruins of what had been a Devourer staging area. The massive enemy ship had been turned into a devastating bomb that eliminated the entire force. The mission counter at the bottom of the screen showed the final tally: 43 enemy combatants eliminated, over 300 civilians successfully evacuated, 0 human casualties. Vex sat back in his chair, staring at the screen. This was just one mission. Kate's first deployment. And she'd been a teenager. He looked at the remaining 46 folders on the drive, each one presumably containing more impossible missions, more incredible victories against overwhelming odds. Outside his window, the Coalition fleet drifted peacefully through space, protected by treaties and overwhelming firepower. But 18 years ago, a handful of human teenagers had faced the galaxy's greatest nightmare armed with nothing but salvaged weapons and absolute determination. And they'd won. Vex reached for his cooling coffee with a trembling hand, finally beginning to understand what Kate had been trying to tell him. The station's chronometer showed past midnight when Vex finally opened Folder 5. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he couldn't tear himself away from the screen. Kate's evolution from teenage survivor to seasoned warrior was documented in meticulous detail across each folder. Now she was Corporal Kate Miller, 21 years old and leading her own squad of 12 humans through what the files labeled as the Titan Campaign. Vex's scaled fingers tightened on his cup as he recognized the name. Every Coalition officer knew about the Titan Campaign, the massive operation that finally broke the Devourer advance and saved 3 entire star systems from destruction. According to official Coalition records, the elite Zenthari strike force had led the assault. The spider-like Zenthari were legendary warriors, their 4 arms and natural agility making them perfect for ship-to-ship combat. Vex had studied the battle extensively during his officer training. The textbooks called it the Zenthari's greatest victory. The first video file opened with familiar helmet camera footage, but the quality was much better now. Kate's voice came through clearly as she briefed her squad aboard what looked like a modified human transport ship. Primary target is the Devourer command vessel, designation World Eater, Kate explained, pointing to a holographic display that showed a massive ship shaped like a twisted spear. Intelligence estimates 3,000 enemy combatants aboard, plus automated defense systems throughout. Vex paused the video and cross-referenced the timeline with official records. The date stamp matched exactly with the Zenthari assault on the Devourer flagship. But here was Kate, apparently leading the same mission with a fraction of the forces. He resumed playback and watched Kate's squad prepare for insertion. Unlike the primitive gear from Folder 1, these humans carried advanced weapons and equipment. But Vex noticed something interesting. Much of their technology appeared to be salvaged Devourer hardware, modified with human engineering. "Remember, we're not trying to capture this ship," Kate told her team as they approached the massive Devourer vessel. "We're here to gut it from the inside while the Zenthari keep their attention on the outer hull." The insertion itself was breathtaking. Kate's transport ship, barely the size of a Coalition shuttle, slipped between the World Eater's defensive turrets like a needle through cloth. Devourer fighter craft swarmed around them, but the human pilot, a young man called Danny, flew with reckless precision that defied physics. 30 seconds to breach, Danny called out. "Kate, you sure about this entry point?" "Trust me," Kate replied, checking her modified Devourer rifle one final time. "I've been studying their ship designs for 3 years. They always put the main power conduits in the same location." The transport punched through the World Eater's hull with a controlled explosion that sent debris spinning into space. Kate's squad poured through the breach like water, spreading out into the ship's massive corridors with practiced efficiency. What followed was unlike anything Vex had ever seen in military footage. Kate moved through the Devourer hive ship like a force of nature, adapting to every threat with terrifying speed. When her rifle ran out of ammunition, she seamlessly switched to a fallen Devourer's weapon. When that overheated, she used human explosives to collapse corridor sections, funneling enemies into kill zones. The Devourer ship's interior was a nightmare of twisted metal and biomechanical components. Organic-looking walls pulsed with alien energy, while mechanical systems hummed with deadly purpose. But Kate navigated it all like she'd been born in the ship's corridors. In one incredible sequence, Kate found herself separated from her squad and surrounded by a dozen Devourer warriors. Instead of fighting them directly, she used the ship's own gravity systems against them. By overloading a gravitational field generator, she created a localized gravity well that crushed half the enemies and sent the others flying into the walls. "Corporal Miller to all units," Kate's voice crackled through the comm system. I've reached the primary reactor chamber. Beginning demolition sequence. Vex watched in amazement as Kate single-handedly dismantled the World Eater's power core using nothing but salvaged tools and an apparently encyclopedic knowledge of Devourer technology. While massive space battles raged outside between Coalition and Devourer fleets, one human woman was systematically destroying the enemy flagship from within. The kill counter in the corner of each video climbed steadily as Kate fought her way through the ship. Unlike the desperate survival of Folder 1, this was controlled lethality. Every movement was calculated, every shot precisely placed. She didn't waste ammunition or energy, moving through the ship with the efficiency of a master craftsman. When the World Eater's reactor finally went critical, Kate's squad had already reached their extraction point. The massive Devourer vessel broke apart in a chain reaction of explosions that lit up the entire star system. In the final video of Folder 5, Kate stood on the bridge of the rescue ship, watching the World Eater's destruction through the viewport. Her armor was scorched and her face was streaked with alien blood, but she looked calm, almost peaceful. "Mission accomplished," she reported to the camera. "World Eater destroyed, secondary objectives complete. Enemy casualties." She paused to check her tactical display. 847 confirmed eliminations. The folder ended there. Vex stared at the numbers on his screen, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for his cold coffee. In official Coalition records, the Zenthari strike force received full credit for the World Eater's destruction. There was no mention of human involvement at all. But Kate had been there. She'd done the impossible again with nothing but determination and a refusal to accept defeat. And this was still just Folder 5 of 47. By the time Vex reached the middle folders, his understanding of galactic history had completely shattered. Every few hours he would pause the recordings to cross-reference dates and locations with official Coalition records. Each time, the same pattern emerged, legendary victories attributed to various alien special forces, but the timestamps matched Kate's missions perfectly. Folder 12 showed the siege of Kepler Station, the desperate 3-week battle that saved the Outer Rim colonies from complete annihilation. Coalition historians credited the victory to a joint Zenthari-Corvin task force. But here was Kate, now a staff sergeant, leading a mixed unit of humans and aliens through the station's compromised sections while massive Devourer ships hammered the outer hull. The footage was incredible. Kate's team moved through zero-gravity environments filled with hostile atmosphere, using magnetic boots and salvaged breathing apparatus to navigate sections of the station that had been breached by enemy fire. When conventional weapons failed in the vacuum, she improvised kinetic solutions using the station's own structural elements as projectiles. Folder 15 contained the liberation of New Titan, where Kate had apparently coordinated the evacuation of 2 million civilians while simultaneously organizing guerrilla strikes against occupying forces. The official records gave full credit to the Aquatic Liberation Fleet, but the videos showed Kate working underwater for days at a time, using modified human breathing equipment to coordinate with Nereid forces beneath New Titan's vast oceans. But it was Folder 20 that made Vex's blood freeze in his veins. The Ghost Fleet incident, the most mysterious victory in Coalition history. An entire Devourer armada had simply vanished while threatening the core worlds. No distress signals, no debris fields, just complete radio silence followed by the discovery of empty ships drifting in space. The folder opened with Kate, now wearing the insignia of a major, standing in the command center of what appeared to be a massive space station. The timestamp showed the date of the Ghost Fleet incident exactly. Through the reinforced windows behind her, Vex could see the distinctive formations of Devourer warships approaching dozens of them, each one capable of destroying a planet. Operation Ghost Protocol is now active, Kate announced to the camera, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent years perfecting the art of war. All civilian personnel have been evacuated. Station skeleton crew reduced to essential operations only. Vex paused the video and enlarged the view through the station windows. He counted at least 40 Devourer ships in the approaching fleet, including 3 of their massive world killer vessels. According to every tactical manual he'd ever studied, the station should have been obliterated within minutes. He resumed playback and watched Kate coordinate what appeared to be an impossible defense. The station, which he now realized was some kind of classified human installation, began deploying weapon systems he'd never seen before. Massive energy beams lanced out toward the Devourer fleet, but instead of simply firing at the ships, they seemed to be targeting specific points in space around them. Phase 1 complete, Kate reported calmly as explosions began rippling through the enemy formation. Gravity mine network fully deployed. Beginning Phase 2. Vex watched in amazement as the space around the Devourer fleet began to distort. The humans had somehow weaponized gravity itself, creating invisible traps that crushed the enemy ships like tin cans. But the Devourers adapted quickly, adjusting their formations and beginning a concentrated assault on the station. The next several hours of footage showed Kate fighting a running battle through the station's corridors as Devourer boarding parties breached the outer hull. Unlike her earlier missions where she fought alongside squads, this time she was alone. Her team had been killed in the initial assault, leaving her as the only thing standing between the Devourers and the core worlds beyond. But Kate didn't retreat. Instead, she turned the entire station into a weapon. The recordings showed her moving through damaged sections, manually overriding safety systems and rerouting power conduits. She used the station's own atmosphere against the invaders, creating pressure differentials that turned corridors into wind tunnels. When the Devourers adapted to that, she used the artificial gravity generators to create crushing fields and strategic choke points. The most incredible sequence showed Kate in the station's main reactor chamber, surrounded by a dozen Devourer warriors. Instead of fighting them conventionally, she began overloading the station's power core. The aliens realized what she was doing and tried to stop her, but Kate had anticipated this. "Computer, implement Miller Protocol 7, she said calmly, even as enemy energy beams scorched the air around her. The entire station began to shake as its reactor went into controlled overload. But instead of simply exploding, the energy was channeled through the gravity manipulation systems Kate had been building for hours. The result was a gravitational shockwave that propagated outward from the station at faster-than-light speeds. The final sequence in Folder 20 showed Kate 6 hours later, standing alone on the station's command deck. The viewport behind her showed empty space where the Devourer fleet had been moments before. Not destroyed, simply gone as if they had never existed at all. Kate's armor was shattered, her face streaked with blood from a dozen wounds. Bodies of both human defenders and Devourer attackers lay scattered across the command deck. But she stood steady, looking directly into the camera with those same calm eyes Vex had seen in the briefing room. "Final log, Major Kate Miller recording," she said, her voice as steady as if she were filing a routine patrol report. "Kepler Defense Station secured. Enemy fleet eliminated through gravitational displacement. All objectives completed." She paused to wipe blood from her eyes, leaving a red smear across her forehead. "Station operating at 12% capacity. Life support stable. Requesting pickup when convenient." The kill counter at the bottom of the screen showed numbers that made Vex's hands shake as he reached for his drink. Over 3,000 enemy combatants, eliminated in 6 hours, by one human woman who treated the impossible like it was just another day at the office. Outside his quarters, the Coalition fleet drifted peacefully through space, protected by the legend of the Ghost Fleet incident. But now Vex knew the truth: they were protected by Kate Miller and humans like her, who had been fighting the galaxy's nightmares while everyone else took credit for their victories. Vex had not slept. The station's artificial dawn cycle was beginning to brighten the corridors as he made his way through the lower decks, the thumb drive clutched in his scaled hand. 24 hours of watching Kate's classified missions had left him feeling like he'd aged a decade. His reptilian eyes were bloodshot, and his usually immaculate uniform was wrinkled from hours hunched over his terminal. The armory was located in the station's most secure section, behind 3 layers of reinforced bulkheads. The heavy doors recognized Vex's command codes and slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the familiar smell of weapon lubricants and metal filled his nostrils. Kate sat at one of the maintenance benches, surrounded by the organized chaos of a professional soldier's workspace. Her standard-issue Coalition rifle lay disassembled before her, each component laid out with mathematical precision. She moved with the same methodical care he'd witnessed in the videos, her hands steady as she cleaned each piece with practiced efficiency. She didn't look up when Vex entered, though he knew she'd heard him. Humans had excellent hearing, something he'd learned from the tactical briefings. But more than that, Kate possessed the heightened awareness that came from years of combat. Nothing moved within 50 meters of her without her noticing. Vex approached slowly, his claws clicking softly against the metal floor. He placed the thumb drive on the workbench beside her cleaning kit, the small device making a gentle tap against the surface. "The records say the Zenthari won the Titan campaign," he said quietly, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. Kate's hands never stopped moving as she responded. "Zenthari got the credit," she replied, her tone matter-of-fact as she inspected the rifle's firing mechanism. "Politics. Humans were still the new species back then. Coalition needed the established powers to look strong. She set down the component and reached for a bottle of solvent, continuing her work with the same focused attention she'd shown in every combat video. Her movements were economical, precise. No wasted motion, no unnecessary flourish. Vex studied her face in the armory's bright lights. Up close, he could see faint scars along her jaw and temple, marks that hadn't been visible in the briefing room. Her hands, too, bore the telltale signs of someone who had spent years handling weapons and explosives. Small burns, thin cuts that had healed into pale lines, calluses in places where most species would have soft skin. "How many more folders are there?" he asked, though part of him dreaded the answer. 47 total, Kate replied, attaching the rifle's scope with practiced ease. "Haven't updated it since last month's patrol on the outer rim. Haven't had time." Last month's patrol. Vex realized with growing horror that Kate's legend was still being written. While he'd been watching her historical missions, she'd been out there creating new ones. The thought made his scaled skin crawl. Around them, the armory hummed with the quiet activity of the station's weapons maintenance crews. A young human technician named Pete was servicing a plasma cannon at a nearby bench, his tools moving in the same precise patterns Kate used. At another station, Corporal Jake worked on his sidearm while chatting quietly with a Nereid engineer about modifications to their breathing apparatus. But it was Kate who commanded the space simply by being there. Even without looking, Vex could see how the other personnel gave her extra room, spoke more quietly when she was near. It wasn't fear exactly, but something deeper. Respect mixed with a kind of awe that bordered on reverence. Vex looked at this small, quiet human who cleaned her weapons with the same care others used for prayer. She wasn't boasting about her accomplishments or threatening anyone with her capabilities. She was simply being honest about what she was, what humans were. And that honesty was more terrifying than any display of force could have been. "I'm requesting a transfer," Vex said suddenly, the words coming out before he could stop them. Kate finally looked up from her rifle, meeting his eyes for the first time since he'd entered the armory. A slight smile crossed her face, not mocking or cruel, but almost understanding. "Smart choice, Commander," she said simply. She returned to her work, reassembling the rifle with fluid motions that spoke of countless repetitions. Each piece clicked into place with mechanical precision until the weapon was complete again. Kate hefted it briefly, checking the balance and sight alignment, then set it aside and reached for another weapon from her personal arsenal. Vex turned to leave but paused at the armory's entrance. The thumb drive lay forgotten on the workbench, its contents now burned into his memory forever. He thought about the official records, the carefully crafted histories that gave credit to other species for humanity's victories. He thought about the political necessities that kept the truth buried in classified files. But mostly he thought about the 47 folders and what they represented. Not just Kate's personal war record, but a glimpse into what humanity had become since joining the galaxy. They hadn't evolved into better warriors through superior technology or genetic enhancement. They'd simply refused to accept that some battles couldn't be won. As Vex walked away through the station's corridors, past the windows that showed peaceful space and distant stars, he finally understood why the galaxy whispered about human soldiers. It wasn't their physical capabilities that made them dangerous. The Corvin were stronger, the Zenthri were faster, the Nereid were more adaptable. But humans possessed something that couldn't be measured in tactical assessments or weapon specifications. They fought not because they were the strongest or fastest or smartest. They fought because they refused to lose, even when loss seemed inevitable. Even when loss meant death. Especially when loss meant death. Behind him, Kate continued her methodical cleaning, preparing for whatever impossible mission would come next. Because there would always be a next mission, another enemy, another situation where someone needed to stand between civilization and the darkness. And Kate Miller would be there, steady and professional and absolutely relentless, turning the impossible into just another day at the office. V&D.